Chinedu sat on the edge of the bed, his face buried in his palms. The room was quiet now, too quiet. Amaka's lifeless body had been taken away hours ago, but her presence still hung thick in the air. He wasn't sure what was heavier, the silence or the guilt clawing at his chest. "This can't be real," he muttered. "She really left me." Then anger rose in his throat like bile. "Why, Amaka? Why did you do this to me?" He spat at the wall. The ache in his heart wrestled with rage, and writing his thoughts down felt like the only thing keeping him from going mad. He wasn't just grieving, he was furious. They had been married for only 10 months. 10 short, confusing, exhausting months. But before that, they had been together for 8 years. "We grew up together," Chinedu would often say proudly. They were the same age, though he liked to remind her that he was 2 months older. He had always felt like the more responsible one. Before they got married, both of them earned small salaries, but Amaka had allowances from her job that made life more manageable. Plus, her parents were well off. They never pressured her, only supported her. Chinedu's situation was the opposite. His entire family leaned on him. Parents, siblings, even distant cousins. So yes, he had relied on Amaka. "Just until I find something better," he had told her often. She never complained. She smiled, cooked, paid bills, and handled things like a good wife should. At least before the marriage. Chinedu had dreams. He wanted to support his older brother, save enough to travel abroad, and still be the man everyone in his family could count on. A baby didn't fit into that timeline. When Amaka began complaining of stomach pains a month after their wedding, he rolled his eyes. "You just don't want to cook," he said flatly, annoyed. But she insisted they go to the hospital. That day at the hospital, Chinedu got news that didn't make him happy. Amaka was pregnant. He didn't jump for joy. He didn't smile. Instead he shut down. "Why now?" he muttered on the way home. She tried to hold his hand. He pulled away. For nearly 3 weeks, he didn't speak to her. "We just got married, Amaka. You couldn't wait," he finally snapped one night. She said nothing, just looked at him with those tired eyes. He avoided her, ate out, worked late. "Pregnancy isn't an excuse to be lazy," he often told himself, shaking his head each time he saw her resting. Then things got worse. She started vomiting every morning. "I can't stand," she'd whisper. She stopped cooking. "I don't have strength," she said. Chinedu would come back from work, hungry and angry, only to find the kitchen empty. "So you didn't even try," he'd bark. She'd cry. "I've been in the toilet all day," she would say weakly. He didn't believe her. "You're just looking for pity." Nights were no better. She tossed, turned, groaned. He couldn't sleep. When he tried to hold her, she'd say, "Please, I can't." And then the smell of food, even water, made her retch. "This isn't normal," he complained to his mother. "Mama, I don't know what's wrong with her," Chinedu said one afternoon, pacing back and forth in his mother's sitting room. His mother, Mama Chinedu, looked up from her sewing. "That girl is just lazy," she said dismissively. "When I was pregnant with you, I was still selling okpa in the hot sun. I carried loads on my head, cooked for your father, and even fetched water from the stream." Chinedu nodded slowly, her words sinking in like cement. He returned home that night full of new irritation. "You see, Amaka, my mother had 4 children and didn't behave like this. You need to be strong." But Amaka didn't get stronger. She got worse. She stopped using anything with a scent, soaps, creams, deodorants, because everything made her sick. Sometimes she couldn't even make it to the bathroom before vomiting. "I can't breathe," she'd cry out in the middle of the night. "Everything smells awful." Chinedu would bury his head under the pillow, groaning. "This is too much, Amaka. You need to pull yourself together." But she couldn't. There were days she didn't bathe. Her hair matted. Her clothes smelled. "Why are you letting yourself go like this?" he asked. She only sobbed harder. Soon Amaka lost her job. "I'm sorry," she told him quietly one morning. "They said I've taken too many sick days." Chinedu stared at her like she had slapped him. So now what? Where's the allowance? How do we survive? She didn't answer. That night, Chinedu stayed out late. He bought bread and fried egg from a roadside woman and sat alone, chewing angrily. Everything is on me now, he muttered. At home, the lights were off, the air stuffy, and Amaka was curled on the bed in the dark. You didn't even try to get food for me, he snapped. She didn't respond. By the second trimester, Chinedu had hoped things would improve. They say after 3 months the sickness stops, he told a friend at work. But it didn't. Amaka began swelling badly, her feet, her face, even her fingers. Her blood pressure rose dangerously. One evening, he came home and found her slumped on the floor, struggling to breathe. He panicked and called her mother. Mama Amaka came immediately and took charge, rushing her daughter to the hospital. Chinedu followed reluctantly. As he watched the nurses hook up the 4, he sat back and muttered, "You see what stress has caused now?" Amaka stayed in the hospital for 5 days. Her mother paid all the bills without a word. When she was discharged, Chinedu expected things to go back to normal. At least now the vomiting has stopped, he said, folding his arms. But Amaka's body was failing her in new ways. My waist is on fire. I can't walk, she whispered. He scowled. Again. You were fine at the hospital. She burst into tears. He rolled his eyes. I'm tired, Amaka. I married a wife, not a patient. She started spending more time at her mother's house. Each time she returned she looked better, but it never lasted. At Mama Amaka's house, Amaka would eat well, sleep better, and even smile sometimes. Chinedu noticed. So you're well when you're there but sick when you're with me, he accused one evening when she returned. She looked away. I just feel calmer there. He laughed bitterly. Because they baby you. Here we have responsibilities, Amaka. That week, she cooked once or twice, managed to tidy the room a little, and even let him touch her. He felt hope rise. Maybe we're getting back to normal, he told himself. But within days, the vomiting returned, and so did the tears. I knew it, he muttered. Back to square one. Household chores became non-existent. The room smelled of stale air and urine. Dirty clothes piled in the corner. Plates stacked up in the sink, untouched. The bathroom was slippery and stained. Chinedu was overwhelmed. Is this what marriage is supposed to be? He shouted one morning. No food, no sex, no peace. Amaka, curled up on the bed, just cried. I can't do this anymore, he muttered under his breath. You're making this house a prison. She whispered something he couldn't hear, but he didn't care. He slammed the door and left for work. At work, his colleagues noticed his mood. Guy, you day okay? One asked. You look like you slept in a drainage. He waved them off. Pregnancy stress. That was all he ever said. But at home, he wasn't handling it well. He barely spoke to Amaka. He came home late, ate out, ignored her. Even when she cried through the night, he didn't offer comfort. You're not the only woman who has carried a child, he snapped one night. My mother did it 4 times. Amaka looked at him through swollen eyes. I'm not your mother. She had started saying that often. I'm not your mother, Chinedu. Stop comparing me. But to him it was a valid point. If my mother could do it and raise us all in a one-room face-my-face, why can't you? His voice always rose in frustration. Amaka would go silent, hugging her belly. The baby kicks when you shout, she once said gently. He scoffed. Good. Maybe it'll kick you into doing something for once. Her eyes welled up, but she said nothing. That night, Chinedu slept in the living room. Then came the nights she stopped talking altogether. No more arguments, no more explanations. Just tears and silence. She's sulking again, he would mutter to himself. It's emotional blackmail. He stopped asking if she'd eaten. He stopped reminding her to bathe. If you want to rot, rot in peace, he said once, slamming the door behind him. The room smelled. The sheets were stained. Still she didn't move. He'd return from work, pass by her like she wasn't there, eat outside, and watch TV with loud volume. At least the TV doesn't cry, he muttered bitterly. One weekend, Amaka called out to him weakly. Chinedu, please help me sit up. He paused, looked at her from across the room, and turned back to his phone. Use your hands, he replied. You've been in bed all day. She didn't try again. He noticed her breathing was shallow, but said nothing. You're always looking for pity, he told her without looking up. When her mother called later that day, Chinedu lied. She's fine. Just sleeping a lot. That evening, he got a small bonus from work and decided to treat himself. At least one good thing this month, he smiled, ordering his favorite kenki and fried fish. He ate it on the balcony, letting the cool breeze wash over him. Inside, Amaka lay still, not even turning when the aroma filled the room. Imagine not even saying thank you, he muttered. He left the bones on the plate and returned to bed. She turned her face to the wall. You're always acting like I'm your enemy, she whispered. He ignored her. At midnight, Amaka began crying again, soft at first, then louder. Chinedu, please, she sobbed. He pulled the pillow over his head. What now, Amaka? Why are you crying again? She didn't answer. You're always crying. Can't a man sleep in his own house? He yelled. She reached out for him, but he rolled away. Stop touching me. You said I smell, remember? Her hand dropped. Her sobs continued for hours, but eventually faded. By the time the room fell quiet again, Chinedu had already drifted into a deep sleep. Morning came with sunlight filtering through the curtains. Chinedu rose groggily, stretching. Amaka lay in the same position. Still sleeping, he muttered. He bathed, dressed, and got ready for work. As he reached for his phone charger, he noticed something strange. Her hand hadn't moved. Her eyes were shut, but her chest was still. Amaka, he said softly. No response. Amaka, he repeated louder. He shook her arm gently. No movement. A chill ran down his spine. He shook her again, harder this time. Amaka, wake up, he shouted. Still nothing. Panic seized him. He slapped her cheeks. Stop playing, he yelled. But her skin was cold. He screamed for help. Neighbors came running. Within minutes, she was in the back seat of a car, Chinedu holding her lifeless body. At the hospital, the doctor came out shaking his head. She's been gone for over 12 hours, he said. Chinedu's knees buckled. What do you mean, he gasped. But deep down he already knew. He had watched her die, and done nothing. The doctor's words echoed in Chinedu's ears long after they had left the hospital. 12 hours. That meant she had died during the night. While he slept. While he ignored her cries. While he pulled the pillow over his head and muttered insults. His hands trembled. His mouth was dry. She can't be gone, he whispered again and again. But she was. Amaka. His wife, the woman who cried every night and begged for help, was gone. Her body lay cold in the morgue while he stood in the corridor, trying to make sense of what he had done. Or what he hadn't. They gave him her few belongings in a small plastic bag. Her phone, a cracked lip balm, a wrapper that smelled faintly of menthol, and a folded list of baby names. Chinedu stared at the paper. It was written in Amaka's shaky handwriting. If it's a girl, Adiz. If it's a boy, Kalechi. He sat on the hospital bench for hours, holding the list. No one from his family had come. He hadn't even called them yet. His mind was racing too fast to form words. All he could think was, she was just 1 week away from delivery. Just 1 week. When he finally got home, the house was silent. No soft cries. No smell of pepper soup or antiseptic. Just silence. He stood at the door, unable to walk in. A neighbor helped him push the door open. The same room where she had died was now cold and hollow. The sheets were still stained. Her slippers sat near the bathroom, untouched. The plate from last night's kenki was still on the table, with bones picked clean. Chinedu's legs gave way, and he dropped to the floor, his head resting against the wall. "What have I done?" he whispered over and over. That evening, Mama Amaka arrived, dressed in mourning clothes, her face blank. She didn't scream. She didn't curse. She just walked into the room, knelt by her daughter's side of the bed, and picked up a hairscarf. "She was too quiet these past few months," she said softly, not looking at Chinedu. "I should have stayed longer the last time." Chinedu opened his mouth, but nothing came out. He wanted to say sorry. He wanted to explain. But where would he even begin? That he thought her daughter was lazy. That he ignored her cries the night she died. The funeral came quickly. Amaka's body was buried in her father's compound, surrounded by friends and relatives who wailed and clutched each other. Chinedu stood like a stone, barely blinking. Every hug felt like judgment. Every glance felt like blame. Her colleagues whispered among themselves. "She was always tired at work," one said. Said her husband didn't understand. Someone else muttered, "I heard she wasn't even eating." Chinedu kept his head down. He didn't say a word. He couldn't. That list of baby names never left his pocket. Back home, Chinedu's mother came to visit. "You have to be strong," Mama Chinedu said, placing her hand on his back. "These things happen." He turned to her slowly. "Mama, she begged me to help her that night." His voice cracked. "And I didn't. I slept." His mother sighed. "She should have tried harder. A woman needs to push through for her family." He shook his head. "No, Mama. She was dying and I didn't see it. Called her lazy. I told her she was dirty. I hated her." Tears streamed down his face, and for the first time his mother said nothing. In the following weeks, Chinedu stopped going to work. He couldn't eat, couldn't sleep. He kept replaying that night, her cries, her reaching out, his cold silence. One morning he opened her phone, something he had never done before. There were messages unsent, one to her mother saying, "I don't feel safe," and one to him, typed but never delivered. "Please forgive me if I don't make it through the night." He dropped the phone, his chest aching. "She knew," he whispered. "She knew she wouldn't make it." He began seeing her in his dreams. Amaka in her maternity gown, sitting on the edge of the bed, smiling faintly. She never said anything. Just looked at him, eyes heavy with sorrow. One night in the dream she touched his hand and whispered, "You never heard me." He woke up in sweat, gasping. The guilt was eating him alive. He called Mama Amaka. "I'm sorry," he said through tears. She was quiet for a while before replying, "You didn't kill her, Chinedu. But you didn't help her live either." One afternoon he took the mattress outside, the one stained from when Amaka lost control of her bladder. He washed it for hours, scrubbing until his hands bled. A neighbor tried to help, but he waved him off. "I have to do this myself," he said. It was as if cleaning that mattress would wash away his sins. But no matter how hard he scrubbed, the memory clung tight. He sat beside the drying foam and sobbed like a child. "I didn't hate you, Amaka. I was just tired. Just confused. Please forgive me." Weeks later he walked into a church, looking completely lost. The priest asked him what he needed. "Redemption," Chinedu replied. "And peace. Because I can't breathe anymore." He told the priest everything. How he ignored her, insulted her, abandoned her in her final hours. The priest listened quietly. When he finished, the man of God said, "Your pain is real. But you must carry it differently. Let it teach you, not destroy you." Chinedu nodded slowly. For the first time in weeks he felt like maybe, just maybe, he could start to atone. Paragraph 31. Chinedu started attending grief counseling once a week. At first he just sat quietly, listening to others talk about loss. A woman spoke of her son, a man of his wife from a car crash. He didn't speak for 3 sessions. Then one evening the counselor gently asked, "Would you like to share today?" He looked around the room, then said in a voice barely above a whisper, "My wife died while I slept, and I ignored her crying." Silence filled the room. Someone placed a hand on his back. It was the first time in weeks he didn't feel entirely alone. Paragraph 32. He began writing letters to Amaka. At night, he would sit on the floor and scribble pages upon pages. Apologies, memories, regrets. Dear Amaka, I miss the way you used to laugh when you added too much pepper. I miss how you arranged our clothes by color. I miss everything I never appreciated. He wrote until his fingers ached. Sometimes he burned the letters. Sometimes, he tucked them into the pocket of her old wrapper. Each word felt like a brick removed from his chest, but the weight never left completely. Paragraph 33. One morning, Chinedu visited the antenatal clinic she used to attend. The nurses recognized him. You're Amaka's husband, one said gently. He nodded. I wanted to thank you for taking care of her when I didn't. The nurse sighed. She was always scared, always in pain. But she loved her baby so much. Chinedu blinked. Was it a boy or girl? The nurse checked a file and smiled faintly. A girl. She wanted to name her Adiz. His throat closed up. He had never known. Can I see the file? She shook her head gently. It's confidential. But the name stayed with him. Paragraph 34. That evening, Chinedu stood in the empty baby room they had once planned to decorate. The cot was still wrapped in nylon. The tiny clothes she bought online lay untouched in a plastic bag. He held a pink onesie up to his chest, and something cracked inside him. I didn't just lose Amaka, he whispered. I lost my daughter too. The grief returned like a tidal wave, and he sank to his knees, holding the cloth like it was life itself. The silence of the room echoed with what could have been. Paragraph 35. Chinedu's family never spoke much about Amaka's death. When he visited, they acted like it was something best forgotten. You're still young, Mama Chinedu said one day. You can marry again. He stared at her, eyes tired. I don't want to forget her, Mama. I need to remember. I need to feel this. His brothers didn't understand either. You go day kill yourself for woman, one scoffed. But Chinedu didn't argue. He just stood up and left. He was done with pretending. Done with denial. He didn't want to be comforted with lies. He wanted truth, even if it broke him. Paragraph 36. Amaka's things remained untouched in their bedroom. Her comb, her hair oils, her collection of scented candles she stopped using because they made her vomit. Chinedu would sit beside them at night, inhaling memories. One day, he found her old diary hidden in the back of a drawer. Most pages were blank, but near the end she had written, I feel like I'm disappearing. Every day I try to be strong. But my husband sees me as a burden. I miss the man I married. I hope he remembers who I was. He held the diary to his chest and wept like a boy. Paragraph 37. As time passed, Chinedu started doing small acts of remembrance. On what would have been their first wedding anniversary, he cooked her favorite okra soup and ate alone in silence. On her birthday, he donated to a maternity ward in her name. He even had a small bench built under the mango tree behind her parents' house, the place she loved to sit when they visited. Amaka's bench, the plaque read. Every time he sat there, he imagined her beside him, belly round, eyes soft, asking him, Do you still hate me? And he'd whisper, I never really did. Paragraph 38. One Sunday morning, Chinedu stood in front of a group of young married men at a church seminar. The pastor had asked him to speak about emotional maturity in marriage. He hesitated at first but eventually stepped forward. My name is Chinedu, he began, and I'm the reason my wife died alone. The room went still. I ignored her pain because it didn't look the way I expected. Called her lazy. I judged her by my mother's strength, not her struggle. And now, I live every day asking for forgiveness. A few men lowered their heads. No one laughed. Paragraph 39. After the session, a man approached him. My wife is 5 months pregnant. I've been frustrated. Really frustrated, he admitted. Thank you for what you said. I need to do better. Chinedu nodded. She's not weak. She's carrying life. Don't let your pride bury her. It was the first time he felt his pain might serve a purpose. If just one man could change, maybe Amaka's death wasn't completely in vain. That night, he wrote another letter to her. Dear Amaka, I'm trying to be better. For you. For the daughter we never met. For every woman who has been called lazy for suffering in silence. Paragraph 40. Months later, Chinedu stood at the base of Amaka's grave, holding a small bouquet of white lilies. He had cleaned the tombstone himself, trimmed the grass, and placed a small framed picture of her beside it. You deserved better from me, he whispered. You were fighting for 2 lives, and I called it laziness. I hope heaven treats you the way I should have. A breeze passed, gentle and cool. Felt like forgiveness. He didn't leave immediately. He sat by the grave for hours, sharing his thoughts, his hopes, and the name he carried in his heart. Adiz. Chinedu started attending grief counseling once a week. At first, he just sat quietly, listening to others talk about loss. A woman spoke of her son, a man of his wife from a car crash. He didn't speak for 3 sessions. Then one evening the counselor gently asked, "Would you like to share today?" He looked around the room, then said in a voice barely above a whisper, "My wife died while I slept, and I ignored her crying." Silence filled the room. Someone placed a hand on his back. It was the first time in weeks he didn't feel entirely alone. He began writing letters to Amaka. At night, he would sit on the floor and scribble pages upon pages. Apologies, memories, regrets. Dear Amaka, I miss the way you used to laugh when you added too much pepper. I miss how you arranged our clothes by color. I miss everything I never appreciated. He wrote until his fingers ached. Sometimes he burned the letters. Sometimes, he tucked them into the pocket of her old wrapper. Each word felt like a brick removed from his chest, but the weight never left completely. One morning, Chinedu visited the antenatal clinic she used to attend. The nurses recognized him. "You're Amaka's husband," one said gently. He nodded. I wanted to thank you for taking care of her when I didn't." The nurse sighed. She was always scared, always in pain. But she loved her baby so much. Chinedu blinked. Was it a boy or girl? The nurse checked a file and smiled faintly. A girl. She wanted to name her Adiz. His throat closed up. He had never known. "Can I see the file?" She shook her head gently. "It's confidential." But the name stayed with him. That evening, Chinedu stood in the empty baby room they had once planned to decorate. The cot was still wrapped in nylon. The tiny clothes she bought online lay untouched in a plastic bag. He held a pink onesie up to his chest, and something cracked inside him. "I didn't just lose Amaka," he whispered. "I lost my daughter too." The grief returned like a tidal wave, and he sank to his knees, holding the cloth like it was life itself. The silence of the room echoed with what could have been. Chinedu's family never spoke much about Amaka's death. When he visited, they acted like it was something best forgotten. "You're still young," Mama Chinedu said one day. "You can marry again." He stared at her, eyes tired. "I don't want to forget her, Mama. I need to remember. I need to feel this." His brothers didn't understand either. "You go day kill yourself for woman," one scoffed. But Chinedu didn't argue. He just stood up and left. He was done with pretending. Done with denial. He didn't want to be comforted with lies. He wanted truth, even if it broke him. Amaka's things remained untouched in their bedroom. Her comb, her hair oils, her collection of scented candles she stopped using because they made her vomit. Chinedu would sit beside them at night, inhaling memories. One day, he found her old diary hidden in the back of a drawer. Most pages were blank, but near the end she had written, "I feel like I'm disappearing. Every day I try to be strong. But my husband sees me as a burden. I miss the man I married. I hope he remembers who I was." He held the diary to his chest and wept like a boy. As time passed, Chinedu started doing small acts of remembrance. On what would have been their first wedding anniversary, he cooked her favorite okra soup and ate alone in silence. On her birthday, he donated to a maternity ward in her name. He even had a small bench built under the mango tree behind her parents' house, the place she loved to sit when they visited. "Amaka's bench," the plaque read. Every time he sat there, he imagined her beside him, belly round, eyes soft, asking him, "Do you still hate me?" And he'd whisper, "I never really did." One Sunday morning, Chinedu stood in front of a group of young married men at a church seminar. The pastor had asked him to speak about emotional maturity in marriage. He hesitated at first but eventually stepped forward. "My name is Chinedu," he began, "and I'm the reason my wife died alone." The room went still. "I ignored her pain because it didn't look the way I expected. Called her lazy. I judged her by my mother's strength, not her struggle. And now I live every day asking for forgiveness." A few men lowered their heads. No one laughed. After the session, a man approached him. "My wife is 5 months pregnant. I've been frustrated. Really frustrated," he admitted. "Thank you for what you said. I need to do better." Chinedu nodded. "She's not weak. She's carrying life. Don't let your pride bury her." It was the first time he felt his pain might serve a purpose. If just one man could change, maybe Amaka's death wasn't completely in vain. That night, he wrote another letter to her. "Dear Amaka, I'm trying to be better. For you. For the daughter we never met. For every woman who has been called lazy for suffering in silence." Months later, Chinedu stood at the base of Amaka's grave, holding a small bouquet of white lilies. He had cleaned the tombstone himself, trimmed the grass, and placed a small framed picture of her beside it. "You deserved better from me," he whispered. "You were fighting for 2 lives and I called it laziness. I hope heaven treats you the way I should have." A breeze passed, gentle and cool. Felt like forgiveness. He didn't leave immediately. He sat by the grave for hours, sharing his thoughts, his hopes, and the name he carried in his heart. Adiz. Chinedu's healing wasn't linear. Some days were better. Others were unbearable. He still woke up expecting to hear Amaka's soft groans or the rustle of her wrapper dragging across the floor. Some nights, he would reach out in sleep and touch only air. On one of those nights, he dreamt again of her, this time holding a baby girl wrapped in yellow cloth. She didn't speak. She just smiled, turned and walked away, her footsteps soft against the clouds. He woke up sobbing, whispering her name like a prayer. "Amaka. Amaka." In time, he joined a support group specifically for men who had lost their spouses. It was uncomfortable at first. They talked about shame, anger, fear, emotions men were trained to bury. But slowly he opened up. "I didn't just fail to support her," he said during one session. "I resented her for being sick. I thought she was doing it to punish me." One man nodded solemnly. "Sometimes we don't know what love is until it's too late." The words stuck with Chinedu. He carried them home like fragile glass. Amaka's absence changed how Chinedu looked at women. On public transport, he now gave up his seat to visibly pregnant women. At the market, he once helped a young mother calm her crying child while she paid the yam seller. One afternoon, he saw a woman squatting at the side of the road, looking pale. He stopped, offered her water, and flagged down a kiki. "You okay?" he asked gently. She nodded, surprised. He never mentioned Amaka to any of them, but in each gesture, he was honoring her memory. Eventually he returned to work. The office had moved on. His desk was dusty. His name on the attendance sheet had been written in pencil. But his colleagues greeted him warmly. His manager, Mr. Igui, pulled him aside. "You've changed," he said simply. Chinedu nodded. "I had to." He worked quietly now, didn't complain as much, and stayed back to help others meet deadlines. It wasn't that he had become perfect, It was that he had learned how fragile life was. Nothing was guaranteed. Not love. Not time. Not even breath. Every Sunday, Chinedu visited Mama Amaka. First she spoke little. But over time the silence softened. They sat on the porch and shared roasted corn or peeled oranges together. She would bring out Amaka's childhood pictures and tell stories. She loved singing, Mama Amaka said once, chuckling. But her voice was terrible. They laughed. They wept. Sometimes in the same minute. She forgave Chinedu slowly. Not because he deserved it, but because holding on was too heavy. You carry her name in your guilt, she said once. Now carry it in your kindness. On the first anniversary of Amaka's death, Chinedu organized a small outreach. He printed flyers that read, "Honoring Amaka, supporting pregnant women in crisis." With the help of a few friends, he donated hygiene kits, baby clothes, and prenatal vitamins to a local hospital. Some of the women looked confused when he handed them the items. "From who?" they asked. He smiled gently. "From someone who went through more than anyone ever knew." It didn't fix the past, but it felt like building a bridge from pain to purpose. He later started a small blog called Letters to Amaka. He shared stories about love, marriage, grief, and lessons men were never taught. His first post read, "This is not a tribute. It's a confession. I didn't listen. I didn't help. Failed her. But now I'm listening. To every woman who whispers for help in a house where no one hears." The blog gained quiet traction. Women left comments. Some forgave their own pasts. Some shared their pregnancy's hardships. Some just said thank you. And one man wrote, "You've saved my marriage." One evening, Chinedu received a message from a young man who had just become a father. "I almost walked away when my wife fell sick during her pregnancy," the message read. "Then I found your blog. Stayed. Helped her. And now we have a baby girl. We named her Adiz." Chinedu stared at the screen for a long time. His chest tightened, not from pain this time but from something new, something healing. He placed his hand over his heart and whispered, "Thank you, Amaka. Your name lives on." He began visiting schools and churches to speak about emotional awareness in marriage. He didn't pretend to be a saint. He didn't sugarcoat his story. Sometimes, love means listening even when you're tired. Sometimes, strength is admitting you don't know what to do. The crowd would grow still. Some cried. Some nodded in silence. His voice didn't shake anymore. It had found its rhythm. His pain had found a pulse, and now it beat for something bigger than him. Chinedu never remarried. People asked. Some suggested. Others insisted. But he always smiled and said, "I'm still healing. And some people only come once." He didn't say that he still spoke to Amaka every night. Or that he still kept her baby name list folded in his wallet. Or that some mornings, he swore he felt her presence brushing past him like wind. He didn't need anyone to understand. He had finally made peace with his grief. It had shaped him, softened him, changed him. And in a way, it had also saved him. On what would have been Amaka's daughter's first birthday, Chinedu bought a small vanilla cake and 2 white balloons. He walked quietly to Amaka's bench behind her parents' house, placed the cake down, and tied the balloons to the wooden backrest. "Happy birthday, Adiz," he said softly. "You were never born, but you are still known." He sang a lullaby Amaka used to hum to herself. The wind rustled the trees gently. Felt like a whisper, like something watching from beyond. That night, he slept with a strange peace blanketing him. Grief was still there, but no longer unbearable. Over the next few years, Chinedu dedicated himself to advocacy for maternal health. He partnered with NGOs and helped train husbands on how to support their wives emotionally and physically during pregnancy. "You can either be a man who builds his home or one who buries it," he would say during seminars. He wasn't trying to be a hero. He was trying to prevent another Amaka. "Don't wait till you lose her before you see her," he would warn, eyes steady. Some men squirmed. Others cried. Every time he saw a woman survive what Amaka didn't, it felt like a small victory. He eventually wrote a book, The Silence That Killed Her. It was raw, brutal, honest. He told everything. His cruelty, his indifference, his regret. Some people praised him. Others condemned him. Why speak now when she can't defend herself? A reviewer asked. Chinedu didn't respond. He had expected the backlash. It's not her defense I'm after, he explained to a journalist. It's her legacy. Her voice. If I have to be the villain to make people listen, then so be it. He wasn't looking for sympathy. He was looking for impact. Through the book, he created scholarships for young mothers in difficult pregnancies. The foundation was called the Adiz Hope Fund. Mothers who had no family support, no healthcare access, no financial stability, women like Amaka, received help. One woman wrote to him, I was almost alone. But then I found your story. And it saved my life. Chinedu framed that letter. It hung beside a photo of Amaka in the only picture he had left of her smiling during pregnancy. You saved more than one life, he whispered to the frame. You're still saving. As the years passed, Chinedu aged quietly and humbly. He stopped giving speeches. He stopped writing blog posts. But every year without fail, he sat under that mango tree and brought 2 white balloons. One for Amaka, one for Adiz. He'd sit for hours in silence, sometimes praying, sometimes talking to them. He never remarried. Not because he couldn't, but because he felt full. Love doesn't end when someone dies, he told a curious niece once. Sometimes it just changes its shape. The little girl didn't understand, but she nodded anyway, sensing the depth of something sacred. One rainy evening, an old friend visited him. You've changed a lot, Chinedu, the man said. You used to be so proud, so stubborn. Chinedu smiled faintly. I lost someone I didn't understand until she was gone. His friend nodded slowly. You ever forgive yourself? Chinedu looked out the window. The rain tapped gently on the glass. I think she forgave me, he said. But I don't think forgiveness is the same as forgetting. Carry her every day. But now I carry her gently. On the 10th anniversary of Amaka's death, Chinedu organized a memorial for her and for all women who died during pregnancy. It wasn't loud. Just music, poetry, and candlelight. A mural of Amaka was painted on the side of a local clinic. Her face serene, her arms cradling a baby that never came. Below it read, She was not lazy. She was dying. The mural went viral online. People across the country began sharing similar stories. Women were finally being heard. And Chinedu. He simply stood in the background, hands folded, eyes full. He didn't speak at the mural unveiling. Instead, a young mother who had once received help through Adiz Hope Fund spoke. I didn't know Amaka, she began. But because of her story I'm alive. My baby is alive. And my husband is a better man. The crowd clapped. Some cried. Chinedu turned away, wiping his face. For the first time in a long time, he cried not from guilt, but from gratitude. He had taken the worst mistake of his life and turned it into a movement. And that somehow felt holy. Years later, long after his hair had turned gray and his back had begun to bend, Chinedu sat once again under the mango tree. The bench was older now, but still sturdy. He placed the final white balloon on it and whispered, I'm coming soon, Amaka. He smiled, not out of sadness, but a deep sense of reunion waiting. The wind picked up, rustling the leaves. For a moment, he could swear he heard a faint giggle. Maybe it was memory. Maybe it was something more. When Chinedu finally passed, he was buried beside Amaka, just as he had requested. On his headstone were the words he had once written in his journal. I did not love her perfectly, but I loved her painfully. And in the end, I loved her enough to change.